The 2026 college football season is fastly approaching, and we're talking all things Ragin Cajuns. Let's get into it here on Ragin Rundown. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into another episode of Ragin Rundown. All Cajuns, all the time. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick, but you can always call me Fitz. It's been a couple of days since I've dropped an episode, but we are back in action, and it's because football season is upon us, guys. The Ragin Cajuns reported for fall camp here on Tuesday, August the 4th. They will hit the practice field for the first time officially on Wednesday, August the 5th. We had a chance to talk with a lot of the players and coaches in their media availability that they had today. You can check a lot of those interviews out. I'll be dropping periodically throughout on social media for my day job at KTC. And I'll also have some episodes here that you can be able to listen into of what we'll talk about here on the show. So we're going to go through what we can expect out of this team. What are the expectations? We'll break down the roster. We'll go through different positions, starting on offense first. And then we'll talk about positions that will be main ones to look out for in terms of battles and what we can hope to see out of these guys in 2026. But before we move on to 2026, we have to turn the final page of 2025, the year that was. Louisiana finished that year 6-7, but at one point they were 2-6 on the year. They were incredibly decimated by injury, and then they proceeded to rattle off 4 straight victories, 1-score games at that, I might add, including an overtime victory against their rival ULM at home in order to clinch bowl eligibility. They then went to the 68 Ventures Bowl, where they had guys opt out in different positions and were again decimated, especially along the offensive line. And they scrapped their team together and unfortunately lost that game to Delaware, finishing the season 6-7 for a third out of the last 4 seasons that we've seen here. It's year 5 for head coach Michael Desormeaux to lead his alma mater, and there are a lot of pieces that he has coming back, and there are a lot of experienced players along the way that if this group can stay healthy, the sky is truly the limit for this team. And that's not just saying that because of what they have on paper, but of how productive the group of guys that they have returning have been for them in their tenure as a Ragin Cajun. So, like I said, we'll go through positions and talk about the roster as a whole. We'll start off with the position that everyone talks about the most, that everyone knows about the most. That is the main position in all of football, and that's the quarterback position. For the first time since Levi Lewis started in 2021, which was the first season that I got here working as a media member in Lafayette. For the first time, we know who the starting quarterback will be going into this upcoming season. There will not be a quarterback competition because Lunch Winfield has proven that he is ahead of the pack. Last season, he had 2,200 all-purpose yards, 20 total touchdowns, and that all came as he stepped in midway through the season. You'll remember in the Marshall game, Lunch Winfield would be inserted into the game when the Cajuns were down after collapsing there in the early parts of the second half of that game against Marshall. And it was almost like a go out there and see what can happen type of moment. Lunch gets in, he rallies the troops, they come all the way back, and then he eventually leads them to a double overtime victory, and the rest was history. He never gave the job back. With him at the helm, it creates so much of a dynamic, a different dynamic to your offense because of his ability to not just throw the football, but how special he can be in the run game. So much to so that he was your 3rd leading rusher last season with 152 carries, 667 yards, and a team leading 9 touchdowns. So he knew how to go and find the end zone. When I spoke to Lunch, I asked him about how much different it felt from last season. When I talked to him, he was the 3rd string quarterback, and now this season he's the guy. And he said it's a great feeling when you have the community rallying around you. You have your teammates, your coaches letting you know that you're the guy, and we're gonna 100% back you. And I also talked to him about staying healthy, right? There on the back half of the season, he was dealing with a high ankle sprain. He got that cleaned up in the offseason to make sure that he could be healthy coming here into 2026. And he said, even if it takes sliding, he's going to make sure that he can be as available as possible for his teammates, because the best ability is availability. And when Lunch Winfield is available, he can be as dynamic of a player as not just the Cajuns have seen, but what the Sun Belt could potentially see as well. In behind him, there is Daniel Beal, Sam Altman, and Coleman Carter. Coach Desormeaux told us that the way the quarterback breakdown will look, obviously Lunch getting right now 100% of the first team reps, and then he'll probably dial it back to 90 to make sure that guys behind them can get some reps in as well. He said that from there it'll be Daniel Beal and Coleman Carter getting the 2 reps, and then Sam Altman and Alex Munoz, the son of tight ends coach George Munoz and former Turlings Catholic quarterback, coming in to also give you a little bit of a mix there, as well as your threes position. So that's how that will look. But as I said, if Lunch is able to stay upright, the sky's the limit for this offense because of how dynamic of a player he truly is. Then you look at the running back position, right? In that room, you have Stephen Blanco, Darrell Smith, J.J. Gardner, Key Ryan Smith, Anthony Ragin Jr., and Omarion Brown. All of those guys last season had little to no impact in a lot of your run game. Now, Stephen Blanco did have 30 carries for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it was in very small amounts of action. Darrell Smith had just 3 carries and 7 yards for you. And then after that, Omarion Brown was not on your roster last season. He was on the Arkansas State roster, where he followed over his position coach, Marcus Lovins, who's now your running backs coach. Anthony Ragin was at Howard. So now and then Key Ryan Smith was in high school. Last year was Bill Davis and Zylan Perry. They've moved on from the program. They were your 2 leading rushers ahead of Lunch Winfield. It is going to be imperative that these guys can go out and prove to the world why they can be a special group, because this is a run-first offense. It always has been, and it always will be under this coaching staff, because that's what they believe is their strength, and it has been, because they are not passing the ball first and then getting the run game. They are running the football to set up everything else that they do along the way. So it's going to be interesting to see. We're going to come back to that to talk about that being a key position battle. In behind or in front of them will be a very, very, very experienced offensive line. If you'll remember, George Jackson got hurt last season. I believe it was in the Eastern Michigan game. He had a Lisfranc injury. I'm going to do a feature story on that at KETC. You can check that out whenever I finally drop it. He was able to get his medical red shirt and come back for another season. He's going to be back as an experienced offensive tackle. Z Alexander is back as an experienced offensive tackle. Caden Morrow at offensive guard. Matt Broussard, Cooper Fordham at the center position. Jacoby Isom there at the guard position as well. So you have a ton of experienced guys that you have in the mix. And when Coach Dez talked at the podium, he said that, the number is around 8 or 9 guys that he would like to see that can be able to help you to win games on Saturday. Of course, you want to see even more, because the more the merrier, the more, literally, because we saw last season of how much injury can come into effect and how quickly guys can go from being a 3 to a 2 and then from a 2 to a starter. After a lot of those guys that I mentioned, you have the Tulane transfer in Jace Mitchell, who had a lot of good reps for you in the spring, with George Jackson being out of the lineup. Jamarian Gooch is also back as well. He, I believe, was out in spring as well. So you have a lot of depth along the way that can help create some creases for this run game and can help to keep Lunch Winfield upright. They are going to be as imperative as ever before. Offensive coordinator Tim Leger alluded to that, saying that if we win in the trenches, we win everything. And I, as a former offensive lineman myself, it goes without saying how important that truly is, especially for this type of offense. An extension of that offensive line will be the tight end position. As we know, you have guys like Caden Jensen and Brock Chappell that will be coming back. In behind them, which we'll talk about that in a second, in behind them are a lot of young guys that have very minimal experience, but you're going to need to have another tight end in there because sometimes they do like to go 3 tight end sets, which is 13 personnel. But Coach Leger mentioned that if they are not able to find that third guy, you might see a little bit more of just 1 tight end sets or maybe even 2 tight end sets to make sure that they can fulfill the needs of what their personnel is able to do, and they're not forcing a guy in there that might not potentially be ready. The last position that we'll talk about offensively, and we'll dabble back into this one as well, is the wide receiver position. Shelton Sampson is your leading receiver. He led the team in receptions last season with 32. He had 537 yards and a team leading 6 touchdowns. He was an explosive playmaker for you all the way across the board. Him and Lunch Winfield had a incredible connection, especially as they emerged further and further down the season. He is going to be getting a lot of attention from defenses, and rightfully so. So there are other guys around him that are going to have the opportunity to shine. The Landon Struthers, the Raji Dennises, the Kadarius Wades, the Trenton Cheneys, the Russell Babineaus, and on and on and on of the other guys that will have opportunities to go out and make plays. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later, of this being a main position to look at as well. Defensively, there are a lot of things that we have to discuss, from the defensive line to guys like Brent Gordon Jr. at the cornerback position, and the list goes on. And we're going to get more into that when we come back here on Ragin Rundown. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Ragin Rundown. We're going to get back into the action in just a second, but before we do, please do me a favor. If you are watching this episode on YouTube, please like it, share it, and leave a comment down below. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, please follow the podcast feed, rate the show, and leave us a review, because that's going to help us get in front of more Ragin Cajun fans just like yourself. We've talked about the offense. Now let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball, a unit that overall in 2025 was right there in the middle of the pack. Statistically, they gave up about 29.5 or 29.2 points per game. And there was a lot of close games, especially there on the back half of the season, that they had to be a part of. But they were able to have big moments and stand up, have goal line stands and get big stops and force turnovers and key moments. But it just wasn't as much as what they would like. So we'll start on the front end this time around. We'll start on the defensive line. Fitzgerald West is going to anchor you down up front on the defensive line. We know that originally he entered his name into the transfer portal, but then eventually decided to pull his name out and return back for his final season of collegiate football. He's going to be a huge anchor point for you. You know, he didn't have a ton of production in terms of statistically, but just from a veteran standpoint, having a guy that knows the scheme, that understands college football, that's seen a lot of how Southern Miss blocks and how James Madison blocks and how Arkansas State blocks and Troy and other teams in the Sun Belt West, he's going to be able to pour that wisdom into other defensive linemen around him. Right along with him, another senior is Maxie Baldwin that's coming back, another local product that gets another opportunity to go out and play for his hometown team. Yet another guy that's been in the program, that's had snap experience, and will get the opportunity to once again anchor that defensive line. You've got guys like Priest Ash, Lance Williams, that could be your edge positions. You have Chase Edwards, that's been, thrown into the mix beginning in last season as a, defensive tackle type of skilled player for you. Then you have, transfers coming in. Broderick Stewart being a defensive tackle that integrated himself into the rotation. And as we know, defensive line coach Dennis Thomas is not afraid to play guys. If they know what they're doing when they're going out there and they can effectively help to stop the run and can rush the passer and not just necessarily always get sacks, but can affect the quarterback, the timing, be disruptive, get him to hurry up and all of those things like that, and plus get sacks, he's going to play them, no doubt. That jack position, we'll look at that as kind of an extension of the defensive line, even though they are considered an outside linebacker. Ashley Williams, when outside linebackers coach Mike Giuliani talked about him, he said he was kind of like a bull in a china shop, that he was also one of the highest graded players that they had on the defense whenever it turn in terms of alignment and assignment. So he knows what he's doing because he's been in the program for a while. Now it's about, as Coach Giuliani said, him stepping up and taking one play at a time and being able to be that elite pass rusher that they need to fill the shoes of Cam Whitfield, who has now moved on from the program. And behind him, you have guys like a Notori Brown that has great skill set as well, that didn't necessarily play as much last year because he was injured. But from what Coach Giuliani has mentioned, he has a lot of ability that can help you a ton there. And then in the linebacker room, the inside linebacker room, this is a place where, last season, Jaden Duggar and Terrence Williams were first time starters for you at that position. Jaden Duggar obviously had been playing, the outside linebacker jack position. He moves inside. He has a breakout season and is now playing for the 49ers, rightfully so. Now you're having this inside linebacker group where you have a longtime guy like a Caleb Edwards, a longtime guy like a Jake St. Andre that are now asked to step up and not fill the shoes, but to continue the legacy of great inside linebackers that have been in the program. The KCO Size, the Lorenzo McCaskills, the Jordan Quibidos, the list goes on of the type of great linebackers that we've seen come through this program. Now these guys are asked to do much of the same. Caleb Edwards, Micah Johnson, Jake St. Andre, Connor McPherson was mentioned as a guy that has a vocal presence. Hayden Darbon, a former Eunice product, was mentioned as well as somebody that will give you an opportunity to do something special. Then you talk about on the back end at the safety position, Colin Jacob, a kid once again that I remember when he was a senior in high school at Laurelville, and now he is about to be entering his final season in college. He, broke his forearm there in the middle of the season and had surgery, and now he is going to be back this year. He's another year wiser. He really came on strong for you, not just in the coverage, but also affecting the passer, like being able to blitz and go back there and get sacks, coming up with big plays in different games. You think about him, and then on the other side is also Cody Jackson, a Shreveport guy. So shout outs to him for that. But he stepped up big time after being in behind a Jalen Clark and a Tyree Skipper and having to continue to understand the defense, and now entering I believe it's his redshirt junior year that he's coming into. Now it's, hey, you're the guys that are leading the pack now. So him and Colin are going to be important. There on the back end. Behind them, Lake Bates and Stephen Raynell are guys that were forced to have to start because of everything that happened, with the fallout from the Texas State game and injuries and all of those things like that. Those guys had to start later in the year, maybe when they weren't necessarily truly ready. And now that they have some of that game experience under their belt, now that they have that, it's now going to be about, okay, now you go from being a 10 to 15 snap guy to now maybe a 25 to 30 snap guy. And then you can eventually integrate yourself to being a starter. You have other positional players like a Luke Green that could be there on the back end as a true freshman that could help you some, depending on how the rotation all falls. Then the cornerback room, which we'll talk about them as a position battle that we could see. Brent Gordon Jr. is going to lead the pack as a true sophomore. He got the starting job in the Missouri game, and he never returned the keys. And he's been driving that car ever since. He is going to be the guy that is probably going to line up against the number one receiver for whoever they're playing against. That he is going to say, as he told me, that I like me in these situations, that I like playing man-to-man coverage, that, obviously they're going to do both. But when he feels like it's a one-on-one situation, he's going to pick himself, which that's the type of confidence that you want to hear, not just from a number one cornerback, but from a cornerback in general. And that is going to have to be something truly infectious that's going to have to go along the way across the board for the defensive back room. And behind him, you think about guys like Avery Demery, who had came up with big plays in the spring, Jeremiah Moses, Curly Reed was somebody that's been name dropped several times as well. And also Kevin Malone, who's somebody that's really young, but Coach Des he believes that it can come on really big for them this season. So that's how things are shaping up from the offense and defensive perspective. In the kicking game, Tony Sterner and Logan Klotz are both back, so that gives you a solid position in someone that is coming back. And then you also have Brick Schultz, coming in. Mason Golden as a true freshman coming in as a punter for you as well. And then in the return game, Jacorian Norris is going to be your guy as the kick returner. Coach Des said, quote, that it is his job to lose. After that ULM game, when he returned the opening kickoff, I said that's your guy going forward until he didn't want to do it anymore and he can't do it anymore. In the punt return game, Coach Des alluded to Brent Gordon being a name that could potentially be brought up, and then I would later follow up with Coach Giuliani as I'm trying to go and pull up my past tweets that I was pulling out, which if you're not following me on social media, you should, because I'm always going to be putting out information, especially when we're in press conferences with coaches and players. Coach Giuliani mentioned that at the punt returner job, guys like Brent Gordon, Landon Strother, Darrell Smith, Trenton Chaney, and Russell Babineau will all have the opportunities to compete for that job, and then he will try to narrow it down to see who is going to be the guy that you need to be back there returning punts. Brent Gordon is very, very valuable, so it wouldn't be out of the norm that they don't make him the punt returner, not because he's not able to do the job, but because he is going to be so valuable to you on the defensive side. It wouldn't surprise me if we see someone like Trenton Chaney or Russell Babineau get the opportunity to be that punt returner. But we know that we've seen cornerbacks return before. Eric Gordon, if I'm not mistaken. I'm drawing a blank there. It was a cornerback that they had a couple of years ago, and I am drawing a blank in my head. I'm saying Eric Gordon, and that's a basketball player. It's going to come to me a little bit later, but it was a couple of years ago. He played for the Tennessee Titans, and it's slipping my mind right now, and I'm recording this episode, so I'm so sorry in the moment. But if I can get a chance, Eric Guerra, that's it. There we go. Eric Guerra was a cornerback that returned punts and kicks for the Cajuns several years ago, so it's not out of the ordinary to see a cornerback do that. So in terms of positions that are going to be important for position battles, one that we'll look at is another obvious one is the running back room, because this offense is not a throw first offense. So they absolutely, positively have to get these running backs that are young ready to go out and play. And we saw how explosive they were in the spring game. We saw how much playmaking ability they had, not just in the run game, but also in the screen game, dumping it to them out of the backfield. Coach Des mentioned how J.J. Garner is kind of a guy that they want to see continue to build up consistency. Steven Blanco obviously has power to his game, which is why he was inserted in a lot of instances on, short yardage situations on the goal line to be able to punch it in. And then Darrell Smith is kind of an all-around guy. But, if none of those three are clicking at the moment, because it's going to be about production, you still got Anthony Ragin there behind him, transferring him from Howard. And he was kind of a do-it-all type of back. You still have Amarian Brown, who Coach Lovings helped to recruit while he was at Arkansas State. So he knows what his ability is. So that room is solely going to be about who is producing. It's not going to be about who's a bell cow, because they've never been that type of offense. It's going to be about who has the hot hand when it comes to running the football. And whether it's one guy, two guys, three or four guys, they're going to have to figure out a way to make sure that if you have 60 plays in a game, you may see 35 and 25. You may see 40 and 20. 40 of them may be coming from the run game. They're going to have to make the most of those 40 carries and how they can distribute that between 2, 3, maybe even 4 backs a piece. Another is the receiver position in behind Shelton Sampson. We've talked about this before, that he is going to garner a lot of attention, but you're going to need guys to step up. You're going to need the Kadarius Wades, the Jaden Johnsons to step up in the moments when they have the opportunities, that if the defense is saying we're going to double team him over here, somebody's going to be open on this other side. And if it's a 3rd and 5 and Shelton's the first option and Lunch sees him and he's covered and you're open, you're going to have to go and make that play. Coach Leger mentioned that he was truly excited about having a true slot receiver as well, a Russell Babineau, a Trenton Chaney type of guy that you can toss it to him behind the line and they can go make it happen, that you can throw them a tunnel screen, a bubble screen, and they can go and make it happen. Excuse me. That's going to be truly an exciting thing to see because they did it a lot in the spring game. Tunnel screens, bubble screens, getting them the ball out in space, motioning them across, giving them jet sweep, and just letting them go and do their work. Russell Babineau is somebody that I saw personally do that a lot while he was at Acadiana High. Landon Strother is another guy also that has been a consistent force for you and a name that's popped up a lot as a consistent guy for you out of that receiver room. Another one on the offense, and then we'll switch back over to defense, is the tight end position. It's not who's going to be your starter. It's who's going to be the guys behind Brock Chappell and Caden Jensen. Caden Jensen is your conventional tight end. Big body tight end. Brock Chappell, very similar. After that, who's going to be the guy? Is it going to be Quandre Coates? Is it going to be Christian McIntrust? Is it Teddy Golick? You know, who is it going to be that's going to be able to say, hey, if you need to go 13 personnel and we're going to load up with all the tight ends on this side, I can do it. And we can run outside zone to this side. If it's a play action fake and it's a tight end slipping out in the flat, who's going to be that other receiver that says, well, Caden's running this route and Brock's running this route, that I can slip out here in the flat and can be the option that you can dump to and I can get up the field and get 4 or 5 yards and move the chains. Or I can get 7, 8 yards. Or I can even rumble down the sidelines and go 20 plus and go and give you big explosive plays. Who's going to be the guy that's going to do that? That is going to be important that Coach Munoz continues to develop those guys and that can emerge, because if not, then again, like Coach Leger said, you might not see as much 12 and 13 personnel. You may see just 11 with just one tight end out there. And you might rotate between those two guys of Brock Chappell and Caden Jensen. On the defensive side, the cornerback position is going to be important because if they can build up a lot of guys that can get out there and be active. I also forgot to mention the star position, Maureen Ilium, when I was talking about a position. Maureen Ilium is going to be back there as your star. Brent Gordon was cross-trained a little bit and had the ability to line up at star during the spring. But overall, the cornerback room, there are going to have to be guys that other than just Brent can go and be playmakers for you, that are going to be able to play lockdown coverage, that can not have their eyes in the backfield when they're supposed to be having the deep thirds, or, you know, making sure that they're having their right assignments, that can make open field tackles. So those guys, the Avery Demerys, the Kevin Malones, the Jeremiah Moseses, the Curly Reeds, the, you know, all of those guys that Coach Des has been mentioning to us and that got reps during the spring, they're going to have to go out and get it going to allow that to be a moment for them. The other positions that we've talked about, I feel like are truly solidified in a depth standpoint. Now it's about just going out, lacing them up, and seeing what guys can do when the football is put in the ground and the ball is snapped. So, like I said, the first practice will be on August the 5th, and we will be out there. We'll get a short window to watch because that's how it's always been. It's normally during individual where we're able to get video of guys, and we can kind of utilize that for feature stories and things like that. But they do have 2 scrimmages. I do not have the calendar in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, I think the first one is next week. If I can pull up the calendar on my phone, I think that the first one is supposed to be on the 14th, and I think they have another one on the 20th. They have 2 during fall camp. I will work to see if we're able to watch them in its entirety. If we're not able to get video for them, if we can at least watch them, I'll be able to go in, make note of that, and we'll be talking about it right here on Ragin Rundown. That's going to wrap up this episode of Ragin Rundown. If you made it to this point in the episode, thank you so much for rocking with us up until this point. Please do me a favor. If you're watching it, Please like this video, share it, and leave a comment down below. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, please follow the podcast feed, rate the show, and leave us a review, because that's going to help us get in front of more Ragin' Cajun fans just like yourself. I'm your guy, Jamarcus Fitzpatrick. We'll see you guys next time.